that means I just have to keep talking now. As I said, we've been talking about forgiveness this month, and this is our 5th Sunday of forgiveness, so we really got it in this month, and that's great. And there was a lot of great talk, so if you've missed any of the Sundays or you want to revisit them, just a reminder that there's always an audio on our website, as well as there's videos for many of the lessons that are given during the month. So if you want to catch up, you can certainly do that. And we're working on having some bullet points that show up on the website as well. So you can kind of work with whatever the theme is every month through the website, as well as coming here every Sunday. So forgiveness for me is both a very easy topic and also a very difficult topic. Forgiveness, I'm really excellent at forgiving others and other things, but I am my own worst critic, and that is where I struggle with forgiveness. And my personality type, if you will, is I'm a peacemaker and a helper. So when we identify our personality types, we also realize that that personality type gets challenged all the time. So in wanting to be peaceful and seek peace, that there's often discord in my life. And in wanting to be a helper, I very rarely try to help myself out, and I'm always putting other people first. So this gives me a lot of opportunity to, as I said, be my own worst critic. I'm very hard on myself about a lot of things, how I function in the world, and I've found that in all the talks and things that we've talked about with forgiveness, that one of the ways that we often forget to look at forgiveness is our own self-forgiveness. It's, forgiveness usually comes up like something's been done wrong to us, so we have to forgive somebody else. And that has been my ongoing perception about forgiveness a long time, and I always forget that, oh yeah, I need to forgive myself for some things too. And so then the question is, well, what do we forgive? What do I need to forgive? And for me, some of the things that, as I said, that come up with being a peacemaker is that, well, I actually do get upset and angry, and it's just one of those that comes out of nowhere, and I find myself acting in a way that isn't my highest and best good. Same thing with communication, that maybe I don't always speak with my best words and my highest and best good. And I think any time that we come to a point where we feel that there's forgiveness, it's from a place in which we haven't operated from our best and highest good. And that's, I think, why it stings so much, because we know we could have done better, or we know we could have said something different. And so, and whether it's for ourselves or our relationship with other people, if somebody else has done something and it's not sitting well with us, then we just have to say, well, they're not operating from their best or highest good either. So it's one of those reciprocal things, and we have to keep in mind both sides of that it's not just somebody else, it's our own actions that we need to reflect upon. So getting upset and angry, poor communication, judgment, I don't know how many times a day where I just slip into a moment of judgment, and thankfully for me, I can slip right back out of it. But sometimes I can't, and then I'll be like, why can't you just let that go, and I start beating myself up. Fear is another big thing that forces me into an area of forgiveness. When I'm afraid of things, I don't act of my highest and best good, and I find myself not acting upon something that I should have, or not taking a step that would, I know, help me in my life's path. So I let that get in the way. My body is another thing that sometimes I'll need to give some forgiveness about, and if something happens where I'm working with my hands all the time, if I do something and I hurt my hand and I can't do my work, then I'm hard on myself, like, why couldn't you have been smarter, you dummy? Why don't you take care of yourself better? Or if my knee starts to hurt or something like that, I get into this thing, well, what could you have done better? You're the reason. And just kind of berating myself because, well, that just seems easier than, that's been my default. I won't say it's easier, but that's my default in reflecting upon things for myself. And I think the other big thing for me is anything that has to do with, if I feel like there's shame involved, that I'm really hard on myself, just like, you should have known better. How dare you do that? And I know some of it's current stuff, but there's things that have been from my past. And so as I say, what do we forgive? There's, of course, things that we do in our everyday life. But for me, I have held on to things far too long in my life. And I'll give you a few examples of that. When I was, I'm going to say 10, I walked up to our local convenience store or drugstore or something like that because I wanted to get a candy bar. My cousins were visiting and they said, "Hey, will you get me one of those candy bars that you're getting?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." So I got there, I got my candy bar and just dug into it right away, and it was delicious. It was absolutely the best candy bar. And I had this other candy bar in my hand that, well, was just taunting me all the way home, right? And so I ate that candy bar. And then I got home and my cousin's like, "Where's my candy bar?" And I was like, well, I ate it. And that in itself wasn't, I mean, it was the wrong thing to do. I took something that wasn't mine. But the amount of shame that was put onto me with that from my family and all that kind of like drove it home like, man, have you done something wrong? And so I did apologize, and I did scrounge up enough change, and I did go get my cousin another candy bar. But in that instance, that kind of built a foundation of shame and making me feel bad and doing that, and so I've struggled with that principle. I do feel like I've let that go. I know I apologized at that time or whatever, but it still kind of comes into my consciousness every once in a while when an issue of sharing comes up, or I'm eating a cookie at home and it could be the last cookie, and I'm like, should I eat this last cookie? You know, and so it still kind of is stirred up. But I've realized that, hey, the lesson I've learned from that is it's not yours, don't take it. And it's okay to share, and if you don't, own up to it, right? I mean, I learned my lessons and I've reflected upon it, and so that is certainly something that's there. And some of these stories I'm going to tell you, they may seem really silly, but it's the reality of like how we think sometimes, and I'm illustrating these stories today to maybe make you laugh at some of the stories you have for yourselves. Everybody heard of a gaming system called Wii, where you do like little video games at home and it's action, whatever. So my goal this year has been to get a perfect score on bowling, and it's definitely easier said than done because I haven't done it yet. So if it was possible, it'd be done already, let me tell you. But anyways, I've been working on this Wii bowling endeavor for several months, and I've spent a lot of time and energy doing it just because, well, it's fun, and I like to see how well I can do, and I've perfected my swing almost, right? So my previous best score getting into this bowling season for myself was like a 267, and perfect score is 300. If you don't know bowling, perfect score is 300. So I got a 267, then I got a 284, and then one night I was on a roll. I had strike, all the way to the very absolute last thing, and I bowled 8 pins. I got 8 out of 10. So I had a 298, right? And I was livid. I was upset, and my wife, my kids are all cheering for me, right? They think it's great. And I'm like, man, how terrible. Why can't I get this? And I was just immediately hard on myself, right? Instead of celebrating this little victory of I've actually done something great, I've gotten really close, I chose to berate myself and be hard on that. And so I had to shift my thinking on that. And we have a little, on our TV, all our pictures come up. And I actually took a picture of this score so I could like have proof that it was there. But it came up last night, and I was like, I put my fist up because I was going to curse it one more time. I'm like, yeah, I got a 298. So it was just another one of those, instead of, maybe we're not always using the words I forgive you or I forgive, but we're looking at ways to reframe whatever it is that we're holding against ourselves, or that one little obstacle we're trying to get over. So that one's kind of silly, but it actually, it looped for a while, and it's been sitting me for a while, and I was raising my fist in anger, but then I'm like, yeah, right? So it's taking something bad and making it into a positive, and I think that's definitely one way to do that. Another example of things that I've been holding on to, and how it kind of shapes things as we get older. In 9th grade, there was a dance, and I was there with some buddies, and it was just kind of getting going, or maybe it was about halfway through, and I was just hanging out, and a couple girls came up that honestly just weren't the most popular girls, and whatever, and they said, and they were very giggly and very shy, and I could tell it took a lot for them to come up there, and they're like, can I dance with you? And my cool guy self was like, nah, not right now. And, you know, I went home that night and I reflected upon it, and I felt really bad. I felt like I had this moment where I could have just let go of this idea of other people's thought about what I would be doing. And the fact that I could think that dancing with some girl that I didn't know who maybe wasn't the most popular was going to be a bad thing. It was just one of those really too cool for school kind of thinkings that really has sat with me for a long time until we've had kids, and I'm raising 2 boys, and I'm really trying to like instill in this idea that, and I haven't actually said, if a girl comes up to you at a dance, you got to make sure you say yes, whoever she is. I haven't said that yet. I might, if they have a dance coming up, I might actually say that. But the whole point is, in my trying to forgive myself, it's like, okay, what is the lesson that I learned from this, and how can I just let this go so it doesn't hold that energy anymore? And so I feel like I've moved that past. So I'm bringing up these stories of old and new, but particularly the ones of old, because as I said, when we hold on to this, we've talked about how forgiveness frees up that energy. But the longer we hold on to something, the more energy that it takes to keep it away, right? I mean, it takes a lot of energy not to move into that place of forgiveness. More energy than it would take to actually just deal with it. But the fact is that we all have these things that we just want to push away. We don't really want to deal with it because there's something involved with it. And I'm just going to use the example of being angry about something. So I've got this emotion of anger that I've kind of let go, but not fully processed. And then I have this forgiveness that's on top of it. So there's these 2 strands of huge energy that are just rolling around in my body, and I haven't fully processed. And so in this process of forgiveness, as I said, it frees up energy. It takes far less energy. And we don't even realize that. And where it came clear to me that I had to work on forgiveness is when these stories of old keep looping through my life. This dance that I didn't dance with a girl, this candy bar that I ate, and many other examples. But that to me is an indication that I haven't fully let go of that, and that how much energy that was eating up in me. And then if you add those all together, all these things that we don't forgive, there's this tremendous amount of energy that's just being stored in our body that is of negative value to us. And that creates a lot of different dysfunction in our life, in how we work with other people, how we view ourselves, how our health and things like that. So this idea of forgiveness and the energy that lets go is truly something that we need to consider. I'm glad that we've had as many Sundays to talk about it, because I think it's important to truly figure out how we can let go of these things. So, as I've been talking about, the process that I have been using is trying to, usually at the end of the day, is when I'm the hardest at myself, when I'm laying in bed and going to sleep and recounting how I wasn't the best with my kids, how I could have spent more time with them, how I may have not communicated something with my wife, or maybe how I didn't work with the client. Oh, I should have done that with the client, you know. And I'm just going through this nightly berating, if you will, or you could have been better. And so I'm really tired of doing that. That's not a great way to end the day and go into sleep. So what I'm doing for myself is saying, okay, whatever it is, if I wasn't the best with my kids, maybe I raised my voice or just didn't spend time with them, then I just say, you know what? At least you were here. You were here in this house, you were present, and you were around them. And I find something positive that I can say about whatever that is. So if it's something with my kids, I find something positive that I could do about that. If I got angry about something, then I think about an instance where I didn't get angry about something that I may have. And so any of these things that come up, anytime that I was found that I was in judgment about something, then I think about, okay, how did you move through that? So taking this negative part of whatever we're holding against ourselves that we feel we need forgiveness, and trying to spin that energy into something new and positive, I think is a great tool to help yourself move beyond these self-forgiveness issues. And so just showing gratitude. So we don't always think about gratitude and forgiveness going together, but I think that they really go hand in hand. And so spinning whatever that is to find a positive in it, and then just, for me, it's like, I'm grateful for this lesson that I get to learn again so that I can move beyond that, so I can have that spiritual growth. So I invite you to maybe consider that as well, that how can you spin this, acknowledge whatever it is, give it some different energy by saying something positive about it, and then show some gratitude about where that can be. And that can be a process for any of these areas that you might have ways that you are down on yourself and not forgiving yourself. And another way that you can do that, you can either do it verbally in your head, or in an instance, for me, an example was when I acted poorly with my kids and I really raised my voice and, in all intents and purposes, lost it with them, right? And I always feel terrible when that happens, but later that night, in my processing, I actually wrote down, okay, what part of this do I own, and how did I feed into this situation? Then I also took a chance to acknowledge, okay, what else was going on in this situation? How did the other people in this situation, were they acting that affected me as well? And so it's kind of processing it in a two-pronged way, where you own it, and then you see what the situation was, what your perception of it was, and then you could write down, okay, what would I do differently about this time? And this can be a process that you just do for yourselves, but you can also do it, like I sat down the next day with my kids and I read through all that, and then I had them do the same. And of course, this isn't going to be applicable in all forgiveness situations, but it's another way that you can do that. And the one other thing that I wanted to talk about with forgiveness and self-forgiveness, and it goes with the fact that we're either forgiving somebody else or we're forgiving ourselves. But I think that in any instance, both are involved, right? Especially when we're feeling like we need to forgive somebody else. We need to come up with some, I think for me, if somebody's done something wrong to me and I've held this ill will for a long time about them or whatever, or maybe feeling bad about myself that like I did something to cause whatever that they were upset about. So figuring out that we need to forgive ourselves about forgiveness, right? There's this process where we forgive somebody else, and we have to forgive ourselves for however we were up until that point in which that forgiveness happened. You know, so that's a way of like really processing it fully on both sides. If we just forgive somebody, but we don't acknowledge that we had whatever feelings we had around that, then we're still holding on to that piece too. And so, again, the forgiveness of ourself is applicable whether it's because of somebody else or if it's our own stuff, but we really have to acknowledge that. So, if you find that you're being hard on yourselves, know that it's just as important to forgive ourselves as it is. It's actually more important, I think, to forgive ourselves than to forgive other people, because we're with ourselves more than we are with other people. So take that time, whenever you choose to reflect upon that. With that forgiveness, you can say, I forgive myself, and find something positive that is different than however you acted, and then be grateful for whatever that lesson was that you learned from that. So in our forgiveness, we can be grateful that we are moving down our life's path, that we are changing our energy, that we are freeing ourselves to be more our authentic selves and our true selves on our spiritual path. So hope you can find some use out of forgiving yourself. All right. At this time, I'd like to take an offering for Unity of Des Moines. So if you'd like to take your tithes and love offerings in your hands, and we will do this